Hello, Zuko here, and this is my last video for September. I'm doing a little bit of an early September reading wrap up, mostly because I'm already kind of getting into the spooky reading that I want to save for October, and I want to get this video out before the end of the month so I can like fully focus on my Halloween content. I think for all intents and purposes I read 11 books this month and DNF'd 2, but I'm only going off of what I physically read because it's one of those days. So firstly, as I'm sure you know by now, I read the Locked Tomb so far trilogy. But I think there's 4 books. I'm assuming it ends at 4, but it was originally a trilogy. So I read Gideon the Ninth, Harold the Ninth, and then Nona the Ninth. I did a reading vlog, which I will link up, I think here. I don't know. But I did a reading vlog, which I will link, and I did a discussion video, which I will also link. The discussion video is also the end portion of the reading vlog if you just want to watch the entire reading vlog. Or if you don't want to watch an entire reading vlog, there's the little clip at the end. It's a 20-minute clip. So Gideon the Ninth takes place in a world where there are 9 houses, and each house has a head necromancer, and each necromancer has a cavalier, so someone who does sword fighting for them for some reason. That's a thing. And it follows the main character Gideon, who is the cavalier for the main character Harrowhark, who is the necromancer for the 9th house. And I don't know how to explain these books. They're wild. There's a lot of bone magic. You need to read them more than once, and I love them. I think I've talked enough about these books for a while. Next, now I have both of these, but I only read the Merciful Crow by Martha Owens. This is a duology about some people who mercy kill, they go to kingdoms and mercy kill sick people, I think, and they collect corpses and stuff. I'm so incredibly tired. I loved Little Thieves by Margaret Owens. That was one of my favorite books that I read last year. These were so generic and cut and paste. These kind of felt like the Boneless Mercies by April Genevieve Tucholke. That was a really incredibly boring duology I read, or 2 companion novels. I don't know. This was just so cut and paste boring. I didn't like it. I'm not keeping it or the sequel. Sorry, I'm not star rating these this month. If you want my star ratings, I have a Goodreads. It's linked down below. Next, I DNF'd The Ivory Key by Akshaya Raman. This is some kind of YA fantasy book, and all of the reviews were nothing happens until 60% of the way through. And I simply was not going to bring myself to care until 60% of the way through this book. Wasn't going to do it. This follows 4 siblings who are all making weird choices. You can see them all. I actually didn't know that the brothers were on the back. That's kind of dope. I was bored. I don't think I like YA fantasy for the most part. I was incredibly bored reading this. So yeah, I'm not keeping that one. Then, I keep shifting around. Then I read Primal Animals by Julia Lynn Rubin. This was supposed to be a YA horror novel set at a weird exclusive summer camp thing. But the only real horror elements was a main character who was scared of bugs. A couple people, 1 people even, get murdered. And this is not a horror novel. I wouldn't even call this a thriller. I don't know. There was nothing actually horrible or creepy or even that interesting about this book. And everything was played really over the top. They're this thing happened and it was the most dramatic outcome you could possibly. Oh my god, this book was it was silly. It was silly and it wasn't horror and I didn't like it. So there's this one. I want to love YA horror. And it's always a really good premise and a really poor execution. So I always pull back instead of giving you horror. They're okay, we're gonna plant the seeds of horror, but we're not gonna give you horror. And it's why? Why is this even a genre then? This is not in order at all, because Summer Suns by Lee Mandello I was reading at the beginning of September. I finished the very end of August, I was reading that. This is a book about 2 boys who grew up together and had a weird relationship, and one of them is now dead and the other one's moving into the apartment he was living in that he was supposed to. The living one was supposed to move in eventually, and they were supposed to live together with 2 roommates, but instead the living one is moving in and trying to figure out what happened and why his friend is no longer with them. And there's spooky elements. This was a gothic, I guess, and it was really slow, and I wanted to love it. more than I did, but I didn't hate it. It just wasn't my favorite because it was really slow. But it is queer, so that's something. Primal Animals was also queer, but kind of boring. So then I read Blood Scion, which I did not just read. These are very out of order, but this took me over a week to read. Not because it's a bad book, and this is by Deborah Fallet. This follows a woman named Sloane who is trying to find her mother's body to prove that she was murdered and that she didn't just run away with her neighbor's dad. But she ends up recruited as a child soldier. But she's also a blood sign, which is someone who can use magic, which are being hunted in this world. And like, I think this was like genuinely... The cat walked by my dog, so he's incredibly upset right now. I like genuinely think this was a good start to a fantasy series. I just don't care about YA fantasy right now. I just forced myself to read this book. I didn't want to, and it wasn't a bad book. Like, there was no fault of this book except for its genre. And I don't know. I just find a lot of YA fantasy incredibly formulaic and predictable. This was no different. But like, not in a way where it was bad. I just, again, not loving YA right now. Then I read An Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard. Everyone I know who has read this book was like, this is a 5-star book, it's amazing. And like, I like the characters and I like the story, but the author kept like almost edging you with battles. They'd be like, okay, there's this epic fight, and then the fight would be over within like a paragraph. And it's just like, that's it? I blinked and I missed things. Suddenly it was over and it's like, oh, I was waiting for this thing to happen and it didn't fucking matter. Like, it wasn't actually important. And I think the author wanted to do like a character-driven thing, but decided to center it around magical battles. And I thought that was a really weird choice because I think the author has a lot of potential, but they wrote something they don't like writing, which is battles, but they made a whole book centered around it. So this was not a 5-star read for me. But I did read it, and I did like it enough that I want to read the sequel, which comes out next year. So yeah, there's this. I read My Dearest, Darkest by Kayla Cottingham, and this is one of 2 books, I think, this month that I fell asleep with the audiobook on and just counted it as me reading it because I did not care. This is another YA attempt at horror. It's like a ghost thing named Neuroses, and nobody thinks that's weird. I don't know. That was enough for me to be like, you guys are trusting a ghost whose name is Neuroses, and you're like, this is normal and fine and good. I don't know. This is a like boarding school book where a girl's parents die and she goes to this boarding school and there's a ghost there. And everyone keeps being like, I want the ghost to give me the gifts. I don't know. And they keep like having to do more and more extreme things for the ghost to do things. And again, that's not a red flag. I don't know. It's like a YA book of teens are stupid. It wasn't good. Again, can you tell I'm just not in a YA mood, like, at all. I was like worried that I was not enjoying YA anymore. I was like, do I hate reading? Am I out of reading? I don't want to not be interested in reading anymore. And then after I finished Blood Scion, like yesterday, 2 days ago, I read 2.5 books in a day because I switched to adult fiction, which just has more substance, I feel like. Like, even if the plots and stuff are similar, although like, get some like that In a Garden Burning Gold by Rory Power was incredibly like YA energy, boring fantasy. And maybe I also just don't like political fantasy, and like, that's fine. I don't know. I just feel like adult fiction has more substance. They get to the horror. They do horror. They're like, we're not going to shy away from this. They get to like more deep and interesting conversations. Usually they're like, we're going to make this book meaningful in a way, and not just like, the message is, don't be a bad person, which I feel like is a lot of YA. So yeah, I was like, oh no, do I hate reading? No, I'm just really not enjoying a lot of YA right now. Does it mean I'm never going to read YA again? No, but mostly because I have a lot of unread YA that I have to read. And I don't think that the genre is bad. I'm just not into it right now. Also, I DNF'd 3 Dark Crowns by Kendar Blake because I didn't want to read it. I started it, I went, I don't care. I can't sit through another YA fantasy book. So I'm not going to keep it. if for some reason I decide I need to try this series again, I will read the audiobooks, as I did anyway. And I don't know, if I need to buy it again, I'll buy it again. I don't care enough to keep this on my shelves anymore, you know? I just didn't. It was a DNF because I didn't care. The last 2 books that I physically own, and again, we're not going into the books that I read but didn't own right now, just because I feel like a lot of them are spooky month reads, so we'll save them for October. But I did reread A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers, and then I did finally read A Prayer for the Crown Shy, also by Becky Chambers. I love these books. They're so wholesome. When my friends reviewed it as like just 2 genderless beings talking about life, and like, yeah, there's not like a big overarching thing going on. It's just 2 people kind of trying to figure out where they fit in the world and if they need to be more than they already are to be worthy. I really like them, and they're super sweet, and they're super fun, and I like them a lot. So I read these and I had a great time. I highly recommend these books. I think that they're a great little duology, as long as you don't go in expecting like some kind of intense book. I don't think it is. In fact, I know they're not because I've read them. So yeah, those are all of the books that I've read and DNF'd physically this month. Next month, I'm being incredibly ambitious and have like 1 million books that I want to read. So stay tuned for that, which will be posted on October 1st. And yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say right now. So that's my wrap up for September. I hope you all enjoyed it. And I will see you whenever I do my next video. And my next videos are all going to be Halloween, spooky month themed content. So I hope you stick around for that. Yeah.